beauty, about 27 years of age. She receives the guests as they come up. Over the well of the staircase hangs a great chandelier with wax lights, which illumine a large 18th century French tapestry, representing the Triumph of Love, from a design by Boucher, that is stretched on the staircase wall. On the right is the entrance to the music-room. The sound of a string quartet is faintly heard. The entrance on the left leads to other reception rooms. Mrs. Marchmont and Lady Basildon, two very pretty women, are seated together on a Louis XVI sofa. They are types of exquisite fragility. Their affectation of manner has a delicate charm. Watteau would have loved to paint them.
Going on to the Hartlocks tonight, Margaret?
I suppose so. Are you?
Yes. Horribly tedious parties they give, don't they?
Horribly tedious. Never know why I go. Never know why I go anywhere.
I come here to be educated.
Ah, I hate being educated.
So do I. It puts one almost on a level with the commercial classes, doesn't it? But dear Gertrude Chilterns is always telling me that I should have some serious purpose in life, so I come here to try to find one.
Looking round through her lorgnette.
I don't see anybody here tonight whom one could possibly call a serious purpose. The man who took me in to dinner talked to me about his wife the whole time.
How very trivial of him!
Terribly trivial. What did your man talk about?
About myself?
Languidly.
And were you interested?
Shaking her head.
Not in the smallest degree.
What martyrs we are, dear Margaret.
Rising.
And how well it becomes us, Olivia.
They rise and go towards the music-room. The Vicomte de Nanjac, a young attaché known for his neckties and his Anglomania, approaches with a low bow and enters into conversation, announcing guests from the top of the staircase.
Mr. and Lady Jane Barford, Lord Caversham.
Enter Lord Caversham, an old gentleman of 70, wearing the riband and star of the Garter, a fine Whig type, rather like a portrait by Lawrence.
Good evening, Lady Chiltern. Has my good-for-nothing young son been here?
Smiling.
I don't think Lord Goring has arrived yet.
Coming up to Lord Caversham.
Why do you call Lord Goring good-for-nothing?
Mabel Chiltern is a perfect example of the English type of prettiness, the apple-blossom type. She has all the fragrance and freedom of a flower. There is a ripple after ripple of sunlight in her hair, and the little mouth, with its parted lips, is expectant, like the mouth of a child. She has the fascinating tyranny of youth, and the astonishing courage of innocence. To sane people she is not reminiscent of any work of art, but she is really like a Tanagra statuette, and would be rather annoyed if she were told so.
Because he leads such an idle life.
How can you say such a thing? Why, he rides in the Row at 10 o'clock in the morning, goes to the opera 3 times a week, changes his clothes at least 5 times a day, and dines out every night of the season. You don't call that leading an idle life, do you?
Looking at her with a kindly twinkle in his eyes.
You are a very charming young lady.
How sweet of you to say that, Lord Caversham. Do come to us more often. You know we are always at home on Wednesdays, and you look so well with your star.
Never go anywhere now. Sick of London society. Shouldn't mind being introduced to my own tailor. He always votes on the right side. But object strongly to being sent down to dinner with my wife's milliner. Never could stand Lady Caversham's bonnets.
Oh, I love London society. I think it has immensely improved. It is entirely composed now of beautiful idiots and brilliant lunatics. Just what society should be.
Hum. Which is Goring? Beautiful idiot, or the other thing?
Gravely.
I have been obliged for the present to put Lord Goring into a class quite by himself. But he is developing charmingly.
Into what?
With a little curtsy.
I hope to let you know very soon, Lord Caversham.
Announcing guests.
Lady Markby, Mrs. Cheverley.
Enter Lady Markby and Mrs. Cheveley. Lady Markby is a pleasant, kindly, popular woman with grey hair à la marquise and good lace. Mrs. Cheveley, who accompanies her, is tall and rather slight, lips very thin and highly coloured, a line of scarlet on a pallid face, Venetian red hair, aquiline nose, and long throat. Rouge accentuates the natural paleness of her complexion, grey-green eyes that move restlessly. She is in heliotrope, with diamonds. She looks rather like an orchid, and makes great demands on one's curiosity. In all her movements she is extremely graceful, a work of art on the whole, but showing the influence of too many schools.
Good evening, dear Gertrude. So kind of you to let me bring my friend Mrs. Cheveley. Two such charming women should know each other.
Advances towards Mrs. Cheveley with a sweet smile, then suddenly stops and bows rather distantly.
I think Mrs. Cheveley and I have met before. I did not know she had married a second time.
Genially.
Nowadays people marry as often as they can, don't they? It is most fashionable.
To Duchess of Marlborough.
Dear Duchess, and how is the Duke? Brain still weak, I suppose? Well, that is only to be expected, is it not? His good father was just the same. There's nothing like race, is there?
Playing with her fan.
But have we really met before, Lady Chiltern? I can't remember where. I have been out of England for so long.
We were at school together, Mrs. Cheveley.
Superciliously.
Indeed? I have forgotten all about my school days. I have a vague impression that they were detestable.
Coldly.
I am not surprised.
In her sweetest manner.
Do you know, I am quite looking forward to meeting your clever husband, Lady Chiltern. Since he has been at the Foreign Office, he has been so much talked of in Vienna. They actually succeed in spelling his name right in the newspapers. That in itself is fame on the Continent.
I hardly think there will be much in common between you and my husband, Mrs. Cheveley.
Moves away.
Ah, chère madame, quelle surprise! I have not seen you since Berlin.
Not since Berlin, Viscount. 5 years ago.
And you are younger and more beautiful than ever. How do you manage it?
By making it a rule only to talk to perfectly charming people like yourself.
Oh, you flatter me. You butter me, as they say here.
Do they say that here? How dreadful of them.
Yes, they have a wonderful language. It should be more widely known.
Sir Robert Chiltern enters, a man of 40, but looking somewhat younger, clean-shaven with finely cut features, dark-haired and dark-eyed, a personality of mark. Not popular, few personalities are, but intensely admired by the few and deeply respected by the many. The note of his manner is that of perfect distinction, with a slight touch of pride. One feels that he is conscious of the success he has made in life. A nervous temperament, with a tired look. The firmly chiselled mouth and chin contrast strikingly with the romantic expression in the deep-set eyes. The variance is suggestive of an almost complete separation of passion and intellect, as though thought and emotion were each isolated in its own sphere through some violence of will-power. There is nervousness in the nostrils, and in the pale, thin, pointed hands. It would not be accurate to call him picturesque. Picturesqueness cannot survive the House of Commons. But Van Dyck would have liked to have painted his head.
Good evening, Lady Markby. I hope you've brought Sir John with you.
Oh, I have brought a much more charming person than Sir John. Sir John's temper, since he has taken seriously to politics, has become quite unbearable. Really, now that the House of Commons is trying to become useful, it does a great deal of harm.
I hope not, Lady Markby. At any rate, we do our best to waste the public time, don't we? But who is this charming person you've been kind enough to bring to us?
Her name is Mrs. Cheveley. One of the Dorsetshire Cheveleys, I suppose, but I really don't know. Families are so mixed nowadays. Indeed, as a rule, everybody turns out to be somebody else.
Mrs. Cheveley? I seem to know the name.
She has just arrived from Vienna.
Ah, yes, I think I know whom you mean.
Oh, she goes everywhere there, and has such pleasant scandals about all her friends. I really must go to Vienna next winter. I hope there is a good chef at the embassy.
If there is not, the ambassador will certainly have to be recalled. Pray point out Mrs. Cheveley to me. I should like to see her.
Let me introduce you.
To Mrs. Cheveley.
My dear, Sir Robert Chiltern is dying to know you.
Bowing.
Everyone is dying to know the brilliant Mrs. Cheveley. Our attachés at Vienna write to us about nothing else.
Thank you, Sir Robert. An acquaintance that begins with a compliment is sure to develop into a real friendship. It starts in the right manner, and I find that I know Lady Chiltern already.
Really?
Yes, she has just reminded me that we were at school together. I remember it perfectly now. She always got the good conduct prize. I have a distinct recollection of Lady Chiltern always getting the good conduct prize.
Smiling.
And what prizes did you get, Mrs. Cheveley?
My prizes came a little later on in life. I don't think any of them were for good conduct. I forget.
I'm sure they were for something charming.
I don't know that women are always rewarded for being charming. I think they are usually punished for it. Certainly more women grow old nowadays through the faithfulness of their admirers than through anything else. At least that is the only way I can account for the terribly haggard look of most of your pretty women in London.
What an appalling philosophy that sounds! To attempt to classify you, Mrs. Cheveley, would be an impertinence. But may I ask, at heart, are you an optimist or a pessimist? Those seem to be the only two fashionable religions left to us nowadays.
Oh, I'm neither. Optimism begins in a broad grin, and pessimism ends with blue spectacles. Besides, they are both of them merely poses.
You prefer to be natural?
Sometimes, but it is such a very difficult pose to keep up.
What would those modern psychological novelists of whom we hear so much say to such a theory as that?
Ah, the strength of women comes from the fact that psychology cannot explain us. Men can be analyzed, women merely adored.
You think science cannot grapple with the problem of women?
Science can never grapple with the irrational. That is why it has no future before it in this world.
And women represent the irrational.
Well-dressed women do.
With a polite bow.
I fear I could hardly agree with you there. But do sit down. And now tell me, what makes you leave your brilliant Vienna for our gloomy London? Or perhaps the question is indiscreet.
Questions are never indiscreet. Answers sometimes are.
Well, at any rate, may I know if it is politics or pleasure?
Politics are my only pleasure. You see, nowadays it is not fashionable to flirt until one is 40, or to be romantic till one is 45. So we poor women who are under 30, or say we are, have nothing open to us but politics or philanthropy. And philanthropy seems to me to have become simply the refuge of people who wish to annoy their fellow creatures. I prefer politics. I think they are more becoming.
A political life is a noble career.
Sometimes. And sometimes it is a clever game, Sir Robert. And sometimes it is a great nuisance.
Which do you find it?
I? A combination of all three.
Drops her fan. Picks up fan.
Allow me.
Thanks.
But you have not told me yet what makes you honour London so suddenly. Our season is almost over.
Oh, I don't care about the London season. It is too matrimonial. People are either hunting for husbands or hiding from them. I wanted to meet you. It is quite true. You know what a woman's curiosity is. Almost as great as a man's. I wanted immensely to meet you, and to ask you to do something for me.
I hope it is not a little thing, Mrs. Cheveley. I find that little things are so very difficult to do.
After a moment's reflection.
No, I don't think it is quite a little thing.
I am so glad. Do tell me what it is.
Later on.
Rises.
And now may I walk through your beautiful house? I hear your pictures are charming. Poor Baron Arnheim. You remember the Baron? Used to tell me that you had some wonderful Corot.
With an almost imperceptible start.
Did you know Baron Arnheim well?
Smiling.
Intimately. Did you?
At one time.
Wonderful man, wasn't he?
After a pause.
He was very remarkable in many ways.
I often think it such a pity he never wrote his memoirs. They would have been most interesting.
Yes, he knew men and cities well, like the old Greek.
Without the dreadful disadvantage of having a Penelope waiting at home for him.
Lord Goring.
Enter Lord Goring, 34, but always says he is younger. A well-bred, expressionless face. He is clever, but would not like to be thought so. A flawless dandy, he would be annoyed if he were considered romantic. He plays with life, and is on perfectly good terms with the world. He is fond of being misunderstood. It gives him a post of vantage.
Good evening, my dear Arthur. Mrs. Cheveley, allow me to introduce to you Lord Goring, the idlest man in London.
I have met Lord Goring before.
Bowing.
I did not think you would remember me, Miss Cheveley.
My memory is under admirable control. And are you still a bachelor?
I believe so.
How very romantic.
Oh, I am not at all romantic. I am not old enough. I leave romance to my seniors.
Lord Goring is the result of Boodle's club, Mrs. Cheveley.
He reflects every credit on the institution.
May I ask, are you staying in London long?
That depends partly on the weather, partly on the cooking, and partly on Sir Robert.
You're not going to plunge us into a European war, I hope?
There is no danger at present.
She nods to Lord Goring with a look of amusement in her eyes, and goes out with Sir Robert Chiltern. Lord Goring saunters over to Mabel Chiltern.
You were very late.
Have you missed me?
Awfully.
Then I am sorry I did not stay away longer. I like being missed.
How very selfish of you.
I am very selfish.
You are always telling me of your bad qualities, Lord Goring.
I have only told you half of them as yet, Miss Mabel.
Are the others very bad?
Quite dreadful. When I think of them at night, I go to sleep at once.
Well, I delight in your bad qualities. I wouldn't have you part with one of them.
How very nice of you. But then, you are always nice. By the way, I want to ask you a question, Miss Mabel. Who brought Mrs. Cheveley here? That woman in heliotrope, who has just gone out to the room with your brother?
Oh, I think Lady Markby brought her. Why do you ask?
I haven't seen her for years, that is all.
What an absurd reason.
All reasons are absurd.
What sort of woman is she?
Oh, a genius in the daytime, and a beauty at night.
I dislike her already.
That shows your admirable good taste.
Approaching.
Oh, the English young lady is the dragon of good taste, is she not? Quite the dragon of good taste.
So the newspapers are always telling us.
I read all your English newspapers. I find them so amusing.
Then, my dear Nanjack, you must certainly read between the lines.
I should like to, but my professor objects.
To Mabel Chiltern.
May I have the pleasure of escorting you to the music room, mademoiselle?
Looking very disappointed.
Delighted, Vicomte. Quite delighted.
Turning to Lord Goring.
Aren't you coming to the music room?
Not if there's any music going on, Miss Mabel.
Severely.
The music is in German. You would not understand it.
Goes out with the Vicomte de Nanjac. Lord Caversham comes up to his son.
Well, sir, what are you doing here? Wasting your life as usual? You should be in bed, sir. You keep 2 late hours. I heard of you the other night at Lady Rufford's, dancing till 4 o'clock in the morning.
Only 4:45, father.
Can't make out how you stand London society. The thing has gone to the dogs. A lot of damned nobodies talking about nothing.
I love talking about nothing, father. It is the only thing I know anything about.
You seem to me to be living entirely for pleasure.
What else is there to live for, father? Nothing ages like happiness.
You are heartless, sir, very heartless.
I hope not, father. Good evening, Lady Basildon.
Arching two pretty eyebrows.
Are you here? I had no idea you ever came to political parties.
I adore political parties. They are the only place left to us where people don't talk politics.
I delight in talking politics. I talk them all day long, but I can't bear listening to them. I don't know how the unfortunate men in the House stand these long debates.
By never listening.
Really?
In his most serious manner.
Of course. You see, it is a very dangerous thing to listen. If one listens, one may be convinced, and a man who allows himself to be convinced by an argument is a thoroughly unreasonable person.
Ah, that accounts for so much in men that I have never understood, and so much in women that their husbands never appreciate in them.
With a sigh.
Our husbands never appreciate anything in us. We have to go to others for that.
Emphatically.
Yes, always to others, have we not?
Smiling.
And those are the views of the two ladies who are known to have the most admirable husbands in London.
That is exactly what we can't stand. My Reginald is quite hopelessly faultless. He is really unendurably so at times. There is not the smallest element of excitement in knowing him.
How terrible! Really, the thing should be more widely known.
Basildon is quite as bad. He is as domestic as if he were a bachelor.
Pressing Lady Basildon's hand.
My poor Olivia, we have married perfect husbands, and we are well punished for it.
I should have thought it was the husbands who were punished.
Drawing herself up.
Oh dear no, they are as happy as possible, and as for trusting us, it is tragic how much they trust us.
Perfectly tragic.
Or comic, Lady Basildon?
Certainly not comic, Lord Goring. How unkind of you to suggest such a thing.
I am afraid Lord Goring is in the camp of the enemy, as usual. I saw him talking to that Mrs. Cheveley when he came in.
Handsome woman, Mrs. Cheveley.
Stiffly.
Please don't praise other women in our presence. You might wait for us to do that.
I did wait.
Well, we are not going to praise her. I hear she went to the opera on Monday night and told Tommy Rufford at supper that, as far as she could see, London society was entirely made up of dowdies and dandies.
She is quite right, too. The men are all dowdies, and the women are all dandies, aren't they?
After a pause.
Oh, do you really think that is what Mrs. Cheveley meant?
Of course. And a very sensible remark for Miss Cheveley to make, too.
Enter Mabel Chiltern. She joins the group.
Why are you talking about Mrs. Cheveley? Everybody is talking about Mrs. Cheveley. Lord Goring says... What did you say, Lord Goring, about Mrs. Cheveley? Oh, I remember that she was a genius in the daytime and a beauty at night.
What a horrid combination. So very unnatural.
In her most dreamy manner.
I like looking at geniuses and listening to beautiful people.
Oh, that is morbid of you, Mrs. Marchmont.
Brightening to a look of real pleasure.
I am so glad to hear you say that. Marchmont and I have been married for 7 years, and he has never once told me that I was morbid. Men are so painfully unobservant.
Turning to her.
I have always said, dear Margaret, that you were the most morbid person in London.
Ah, but you are always sympathetic, Olivia.
Is it morbid to have a desire for food? I have a great desire for food. Lord Goring, will you give me some supper?
With pleasure, Miss Mabel.
Moves away with her.
How horrid you have been! You have never talked to me the whole evening.
How could I? You went away with the child diplomatist.
You might have followed us. Pursuit would have been only polite. I don't think I like you at all this evening.
I like you immensely.
Well, I wish you'd show it in a more marked way.
They go downstairs.
Olivia, I have a curious feeling of absolute faintness. I think I should like some supper very much. I know I should like some supper.
I am positively dying for supper, Margaret.
Men are so horribly selfish. They never think of these things.
Men are grossly material. Grossly material.
The Vicomte de Nanjac enters from the music-room with some other guests. After having carefully examined all the people present, he approaches Lady Basildon.
May I have the honor of taking you down to supper, Comtesse?
Coldly.
I never take supper. Thank you, Viscount.
The Vicomte is about to retire. Lady Basildon, seeing this, rises at once and takes his arm.
But I will come down with you with pleasure.
I am so fond of eating. I am very English in all my tastes.
You look quite English, Viscount. Quite English.
They pass out. Mr. Montfort, a perfectly groomed young dandy, approaches Mrs. Marchmont.
Like some supper, Mrs. Marchmont?
Languidly.
Thank you, Mr. Montfort. I never touch supper.
Rises hastily and takes his arm.
But I will sit beside you and watch you.
I don't know that I like being watched when I'm eating.
Then I will watch someone else.
I don't know that I should like that either.
Severely.
Pray, Mr. Montfort, do not make these painful scenes of jealousy in public.
They go downstairs with the other guests, passing Sir Robert Chiltern and Mrs. Cheveley, who now enter.
And are you going to any of our country houses before you leave England, Mrs. Cheveley?
Oh, no. I cannot stand your English house parties. In England, people actually try to be brilliant at breakfast. That is so dreadful of them. Only dull people are brilliant at breakfast. And then the family skeleton is always reading family prayers. My stay in England really depends on you, Sir Robert.
Sits down on the sofa, taking a seat beside her.
Seriously?
Quite seriously. I want to talk to you about a great political and financial scheme. About this Argentine Canal Company, in fact.
What a tedious, practical subject for you to talk about, Mrs. Cheveley.
Oh, I like tedious practical subjects. What I don't like are tedious practical people. There is a wide difference. Besides, you are interested, I know, in international canal schemes. You were Lord Radley's secretary, weren't you, when the government bought the Suez Canal shares?
Yes, but the Suez Canal was a very great and splendid undertaking. It gave us our direct route to India. It had imperial value. It was necessary that we should have control. This Argentine scheme is a commonplace stock exchange swindle.
A speculation, Sir Robert. A brilliant, daring speculation.
Believe me, Mrs. Cheveley, it is a swindle. Let us call things by their proper names. It makes matters simpler. We have all the information about it at the Foreign Office. In fact, I sent out a special commission to inquire into the matter privately, and they report that the works are hardly begun, and as for the money already subscribed, no one seems to know what has become of it. The whole thing is a second Panama, and with not a quarter of the chance of success that miserable affair ever had. I hope you've not invested in it. I'm sure you are far too clever to have done that.
I have invested very largely in it.
Who could have advised you to do such a foolish thing?
Your old friend, and mine.
Who?
Baron Arnheim.
Frowning.
Ah, yes, I remember hearing at the time of his death that he'd been mixed up in the whole affair.
It was his last romance. His last but one, to do him justice.
Rising.
But you've not seen my Corot's yet. They're in the music room. Corot's seem to go with music, don't they? May I show them to you?
Shaking her head.
I am not in a mood tonight for silver twilights or rose-pink dawns. I want to talk business.
Motions to him with her fan to sit down beside her.
I fear I have no advice to give you, Mrs. Cheveley, except to interest yourself in something less dangerous. The success of the canal depends, of course, on the attitude of England, and I'm going to lay the report of the commissioners before the House tomorrow night.
That you must not do. In your own interests, Sir Robert, to say nothing of mine, you must not do that.
Looking at her in wonder.
In my own interests? My dear Mrs. Cheveley, what do you mean?
Sits down beside her.
Sir Robert, I will be quite frank with you. I want you to withdraw the report that you have intended to lay before the House, on the ground that you have reason to believe that the commissioners have been prejudiced or misinformed or something. Then I want you to say a few words to the effect that the government is going to reconsider the question, and that you have reason to believe that the canal, if completed, will be of great international value. You know the sort of things ministers say in cases of this kind. A few ordinary platitudes will do. In modern life nothing produces such an effect as a good platitude. It makes the whole world kin. Will you do that for me?
Mrs. Cheveley, you cannot be serious in making me such a proposition.
I am quite serious.
Coldly.
Pray allow me to believe that you are not.
Speaking with great deliberation and emphasis.
Ah, but I am. And if you do what I ask you, I will pay you very handsomely.
Pay me?
Yes.
I'm afraid I don't quite understand what you mean.
Leaning back on the sofa and looking at him.
How very disappointing. And I have come all the way from Vienna in order that you should thoroughly understand me.
I fear I don't.
In her most nonchalant manner.
My dear Sir Robert, you are a man of the world, and you have your price, I suppose. Everybody has nowadays. The drawback is that most people are so dreadfully expensive. I know I am. I hope you will be more reasonable in your terms.
Rises indignantly.
If you'll allow me, I will call your carriage for you. You have lived so long abroad, Mrs. Cheveley, that you seem to be unable to realize that you are talking to an English gentleman.
Detains him by touching his arm with her fan and keeping it there while she is talking.
I realize that I am talking to a man who laid the foundation of his fortune by selling to a stock exchange speculator a cabinet secret.
Biting his lip.
What do you mean?
Rising and facing him.
I mean that I know the real origin of your wealth and your career, and I have got your letter, too.
What letter?
Contemptuously.
The letter you wrote to Baron Arnheim, when you were Lord Radley's secretary, telling the Baron to buy Suez Canal shares, a letter written 3 days before the government announced its own purchase.
Hoarsely.
It is not true.
You thought that letter had been destroyed. How foolish of you. It is in my possession.
The affair to which you allude was no more than a speculation. The House of Commons had not yet passed the bill. It might have been rejected.
It was a swindle, Sir Robert. Let us call things by their proper names. It makes everything simpler. And now I am going to sell you that letter, and the price I ask for it is your public support of the Argentine scheme. You made your own fortune out of one canal. You must help me and my friends to make our fortunes out of another.
It is infamous what you propose. Infamous.
Oh, no. This is the game of life as we all have to play it, Sir Robert, sooner or later.
I cannot do what you ask me.
You mean you cannot help doing it. You know you are standing on the edge of a precipice, and it is not for you to make terms. It is for you to accept them. Supposing you refuse?"
What then?
"My dear Sir Robert, what then? You are ruined, that is all. Remember to what a point your Puritanism in England has brought you. In old days nobody pretended to be a bit better than his neighbours. In fact, to be a bit better than one's neighbour was considered excessively vulgar and middle class. Nowadays, with our modern mania for morality, everyone has to pose as a paragon of purity, incorruptibility, and all the other 7 deadly virtues. And what is the result? You all go over like ninepins, one after the other. Not a year passes in England without somebody disappearing. Scandals used to lend charm, or at least interest, to a man. Now they crush him. And yours is a very nasty scandal. You couldn't survive it. If it were known that as a young man, secretary to a great and important minister, you sold a cabinet secret for a large sum of money, and that that was the origin of your wealth and career, you would be hounded out of public life. You would disappear completely. And after all, Sir Robert, why should you sacrifice your entire future rather than deal diplomatically with your enemy? For the moment I am your enemy. I admit it. And I am much stronger than you are. The big battalions are on my side. You have a splendid position, but it is your splendid position that makes you so vulnerable. You can't defend it, and I am in attack. Of course I have not talked morality to you. You must admit in fairness that I have spared you that. Years ago you did a clever, unscrupulous thing. It turned out a great success. You owe to it your fortune and position, and now you have got to pay for it. Sooner or later we have all to pay for what we do. You have to pay now. Before I leave you tonight, you have got to promise me to suppress your report, and to speak in the House in favour of this scheme."
What you ask is impossible.
You must make it possible. You are going to make it possible. Sir Robert, you know what your English newspapers are like. Suppose that when I leave this house I drive down to some newspaper office and give them this scandal and the proofs of it. Think of their loathsome joy, of the delight they would have in dragging you down, of the mud and mire they would plunge you in. Think of the hypocrite, with his greasy smile, penning his leading article, and arranging the foulness of the public placard.
Stop! You want me to withdraw the report, and to make a speech stating that I believe there are possibilities in the scheme?
Sitting down on the sofa.
Those are my terms.
In a low voice.
I will give you any sum of money you want.
Even you are not rich enough, Sir Robert, to buy back your past. No man is.
I will not do what you ask me. I will not.
You have to. If you don't...
Rises from the sofa. Bewildered and unnerved.
Wait a moment. What did you propose? You said that you would give me back my letter, didn't you?
Yes, that is agreed. I will be in the ladies' gallery tomorrow night at 11:30. If by that time, and you will have had heaps of opportunity, you have made an announcement to the House in the terms I wish, I shall hand you back your letter with the prettiest thanks, and the best, or at any rate the most suitable, compliment I can think of. I intend to play quite fairly with you. One should always play fairly when one has the winning cards. The Baron taught me that, amongst other things.
You must let me have time to consider your proposal.
No, you must settle now.
Give me a week. 3 days.
Impossible. I have got to telegraph to Vienna tonight.
My God, what brought you into my life?
Circumstances.
Moves towards the door.
Don't go. I consent. The report shall be withdrawn. I will arrange for a question to be put to me on the subject.
Thank you. I knew we could come to an amicable agreement. I understood your nature from the first. I analyzed you, though you did not adore me. And now you can get my carriage for me, Sir Robert. I see the people coming up from supper, and Englishmen always get romantic after a meal, and that bores me dreadfully.
Exit Sir Robert Chiltern. Enter guests. Lady Chiltern, Lady Markby, Lord Caversham, Lady Basildon, Mrs. Marchmont, Vicomte de Langeac, Mr. Montfort.
Well, dear Mrs. Cheveley, I hope you have enjoyed yourself. Sir Robert is very entertaining, is he not?
Most entertaining. I have enjoyed my talk with him immensely.
He has had a very interesting and brilliant career, and he has married a most admirable wife. Lady Chiltern is a woman of the very highest principles, I am glad to say. I am a little too old now myself to trouble about setting a good example, but I always admire people who do. And Lady Chiltern has a very ennobling effect on life, though her dinner parties are rather dull sometimes. But one can't have everything, can one? And now I must go, dear. Shall I call for you tomorrow?
Thanks.
We might drive in the park at 5. Everything looks so fresh in the park now.
Except the people.
Perhaps the people are a little jaded. I have often observed that the season as it goes on produces a kind of softening of the brain. However, I think anything is better than high intellectual pressure. That is the most unbecoming thing there is. It makes the noses of the young girls so particularly large, and there is nothing so difficult to marry as a large nose. Men don't like them. Good night, dear.
To Lady Chiltern.
Good night, Gertrude.
Goes out on Lord Caversham's arm.
What a charming house you have, Lady Chiltern. I have spent a delightful evening. It has been so interesting getting to know your husband.
Why did you wish to meet my husband, Mrs. Cheveley?
Oh, I will tell you. I wanted to interest him in this Argentine Canal scheme, of which I dare say you have heard, and I found him most susceptible to reason, I mean, a rare thing in a man. I converted him in 10 minutes. He is going to make a speech in the House to-morrow night in favour of the idea. We must go to the Ladies' Gallery and hear him. It will be a great occasion.
There must be some mistake. That scheme could never have my husband's support.
Oh, I assure you it's all settled. I don't regret my tedious journey from Vienna now. It has been a great success. But of course, for the next 24 hours the whole thing is a dead secret.
Gently.
A secret? Between whom?
With a flash of amusement in her eyes.
Between your husband and myself.
Entering.
Your carriage is here, Mrs. Cheveley.
Thanks. Good evening, Lady Chiltern. Good night, Lord Goring. I am at Claridge's. Don't you think you might leave a card?
If you wish it, Mrs. Cheveley.
Oh, don't be so solemn about it, or I shall be obliged to leave a card on you. In England I suppose that would hardly be considered en règle. Abroad we are more civilized. Will you see me down, Sir Robert? Now that we have both the same interests at heart, we shall be great friends, I hope.
Sails out on Sir Robert Chiltern's arm. Lady Chiltern goes to the top of the staircase and looks down at them as they descend. Her expression is troubled. After a little time she is joined by some of the guests, and passes with them into another reception-room.
What a horrid woman!
You should go to bed, Miss Mabel.
Lord Goring!
My father told me to go to bed an hour ago. I don't see why I shouldn't give you the same advice. I always pass on good advice. It is the only thing to do with it. It is never of any use to oneself.
Lord Goring, you are always ordering me out of the room. I think it most courageous of you, especially as I am not going to bed for hours.
Goes over to the sofa.
You can come and sit down if you like, and talk about anything in the world, except the Royal Academy, Mrs. Cheveley, or novels in Scotch dialect. They are not improving subjects.
Catches sight of something that is lying on the sofa, half hidden by the cushion.
What is this? Someone has dropped a diamond brooch. Quite beautiful, isn't it?
Shows it to him.
I wish it was mine. But Gertrude won't let me wear anything but pearls, and I am thoroughly sick of pearls. They make one look so plain, so good, and so intellectual. I wonder whom the brooch belongs to.
I wonder who dropped it.
It is a beautiful brooch.
It is a handsome bracelet.
It isn't a bracelet, it's a brooch.
It can be used as a bracelet.
Takes it from her, and, pulling out a green letter case, puts the ornament carefully in it, and replaces the whole thing in his breast pocket with the most perfect sang-froid.
What are you doing?
Miss Mabel, I'm going to make a rather strange request to you.
Eagerly.
Oh, pray do. I have been waiting for it all the evening.
Is a little taken aback, but recovers himself.
Don't mention to anybody that I have taken charge of this brooch. Should anyone write and claim it, let me know at once.
That is a strange request.
Well, you see, I gave this brooch to somebody once, years ago.
You did?
Yes.
Lady Chiltern enters alone. The other guests have gone.
Then I shall certainly bid you good night. Good night, Gertrude.
Exit.
Good night, dear.
To Lord Goring.
You saw whom Lady Markby brought here tonight?
Yes, it was an unpleasant surprise. Why did she come here for?
Apparently to try and lure Robert to uphold some fraudulent scheme in which she is interested. The Argentine Canal, in fact.
She has mistaken her man, hasn't she?
She is incapable of understanding an upright nature like my husband's.
Yes. I should fancy she came to grief if she tried to get Robert into her toils. It is extraordinary what astounding mistakes clever women make.
I don't call women of that kind clever. I call them stupid.
Same thing, often. Good night, Lady Chiltern.
Good night.
Enter Sir Robert Chiltern.
My dear Arthur, you're not going. Do stop a little.
Afraid I can't, thanks. I have promised to look in at the Hartlocks. I believe they have got a mauve Hungarian band that plays mauve Hungarian music. See you soon. Goodbye.
Exit.
How beautiful you look tonight, Gertrude.
Robert, it is not true, is it? You are not going to lend your support to this Argentine speculation? You couldn't.
Starting.
Who told you I intended to do so?
That woman who has just gone out, Mrs. Cheveley as she calls herself now. She seemed to taunt me with it. Robert, I know this woman, you don't. We were at school together. She was untruthful, dishonest, an evil influence on everyone whose trust or friendship she could win. I despised her. She stole things. She was a thief. She was sent away for being a thief. Why do you let her influence you?
Gertrude, what you tell me may be true, but it happened many years ago. It is best forgotten. Mrs. Cheveley may have changed since then. No one should be entirely judged by their past.
Sadly.
One's past is what one is. It is the only way by which people should be judged.
That is a hard saying, Gertrude.
It is a true saying, Robert. And what did she mean by boasting that she had got you to lend your support, your name, to a thing I have heard you describe as the most dishonest and fraudulent scheme there has ever been in political life?
Biting his lip.
I was mistaken in the view that I took. We all may make mistakes.
But you told me yesterday that you had received the report from the Commission, and that it entirely condemned the whole thing.
Walking up and down.
I have reasons now to believe that the Commission was prejudiced, or at any rate misinformed. Besides, Gertrude, public and private life are different things. They have different laws, and move on different lines.
They should both represent man at his highest. I see no difference between them.
Stopping.
In the present case, on a matter of practical politics, I have changed my mind. That is all.
All?
Sternly.
Yes.
Robert! Oh, it is horrible that I should have to ask you such a question. Robert, are you telling me the whole truth?
Why do you ask me such a question?
After a pause.
Why do you not answer it?
Sitting down.
Gertrude, Truth is a very complex thing, and politics is a very complex business. There are wheels within wheels. One may be under certain obligations to people that one must pay. Sooner or later in political life one has to compromise. Everyone does.
Compromise? Robert, why do you talk so differently tonight from the way I have always heard you talk? Why are you changed?
I'm not changed, but circumstances alter things.
Circumstances should never alter principles.
But if I told you...
What?
That it was necessary, vitally necessary.
It can never be necessary to do what is not honourable. Or if it be necessary, then what is it that I have loved? But it is not, Robert, tell me it is not. Why should it be? What gain would you get? Money? We have no need of that. And money that comes from a tainted source is a degradation. Power? But power is nothing in itself. It is power to do good that is fine, that and that only. What is it, then? Robert, tell me why you are going to do this dishonourable thing.
Gertrude, you have no right to use that word. I told you it was a question of rational compromise. It is no more than that.
Robert, that is all very well for other men, for men who treat life simply as a sordid speculation, but not for you, Robert, not for you. You are different. All your life you have stood apart from others. You have never let the world soil you. To the world, as to myself, you have been an ideal always. Oh, be that ideal still. That great inheritance throw not away. That tower of ivory do not destroy. Robert, men can love what is beneath them, things unworthy, stained, dishonoured. We women worship when we love, and when we lose our worship, we lose everything. Oh, don't kill my love for you, don't kill that!
Gertrude!
I know that there are men with horrible secrets in their lives, men who have done some shameful thing, and who in some critical moment have to pay for it by doing some other act of shame. Oh, don't tell me you are such as they are! Robert, is there in your life any secret dishonour or disgrace? Tell me at once that...
That what?
Speaking very slowly.
That our lives may drift apart.
Drift apart?
That they may be entirely separate. It would be better for us both.
Gertrude, there is nothing in my past life that you might not know.
I was sure of it, Robert, I was sure of it. But why did you say those dreadful things, things so unlike your real self? Don't let us ever talk about the subject again. You will write, won't you, to Mrs. Cheveley, and tell her that you cannot support this scandalous scheme of hers. If you have given her any promise, you must take it back, that is all.
Must I write and tell her that?
Surely, Robert, what else is there to do?
I might see her personally. It would be better.
You must never see her again, Robert. She is not a woman you should ever speak to. She is not worthy to talk to a man like you. No, you must write to her at once, now, this moment, and let your letter show her that your decision is quite irrevocable.
Write this moment?
Yes.
But it is so late. It is close on 12.
That makes no matter. She must know at once that she has been mistaken in you, and that you are not a man to do anything base or underhanded or dishonourable. Write here, Robert. Write that you decline to support this scheme of hers, as you hold it to be a dishonest scheme. Yes, write the word dishonest. She knows what that word means.
Sir Robert Chiltern sits down and writes a letter. His wife takes it up and reads it.
Yes, that will do.
Rings bell.
And now the envelope.
He writes the envelope slowly. Enter Mason.
Have this letter sent at once to Claridge's Hotel. There is no answer.
Exit Mason. Lady Chiltern kneels down beside her husband and puts her arms around him.
Robert, love gives one an instinct to things. I feel tonight that I have saved you from something that might have been a danger to you, from something that might have made men honour you less than they do. I don't think you realize sufficiently, Robert, that you have brought into the political life of our time a nobler atmosphere, a finer attitude towards life, a freer air of purer aims and higher ideals. I know it, and for that I love you, Robert.
Oh, love me always, Gertrude, love me always.
I will love you always, because you will always be worthy of love. We needs must love the highest when we see it.
Kisses him, and rises and goes out. Sir Robert Chiltern walks up and down for a moment, then sits down and buries his face in his hands. The servant enters and begins pulling out the lights. Sir Robert Chiltern looks up.
Put out the lights, Mason. Put out the lights.
The servant puts out the lights. The room becomes almost dark. The only light there is comes from the great chandelier that hangs over the staircase and illumines the tapestry of the triumph of love. End of Act 1. Second Act. Scene: morning room at Sir Robert Chiltern's house. Lord Goring, dressed in the height of fashion, is lounging in an armchair. Sir Robert Chiltern is standing in front of the fireplace. He is evidently in a state of great mental excitement and distress. As the scene progresses, he paces nervously up and down the room.
My dear Robert, it is a very awkward business, very awkward indeed. You should have told your wife the whole thing. Secrets from other people's wives are a necessary luxury in modern life. So, at least, I am told at the club by people who are bold enough to know better. But no man should have a secret from his own wife. She invariably finds it out. Women have a wonderful instinct about things. They can discover everything except the obvious.
Arthur, I couldn't tell my wife. When could I have told her? Not last night. It would have made a lifelong separation between us, and I would have lost the love of the one woman in the world I worship, of the only woman who has ever stirred love within me. Last night it would have been quite impossible. She would have turned from me in horror and in contempt.
Is Lady Chiltern as perfect as all that?
Yes, my wife is as perfect as all that.
Taking off his left-hand glove.
What a pity. Oh, I beg your pardon, my dear fellow. I didn't quite mean that. But if what you tell me is true, I should like to have a serious talk about life with Lady Chiltern.
It would be quite useless.
May I try?
Yes, but nothing could make her alter her views.
Well, at the worst, it would simply be a psychological experiment.
All such experiments are terribly dangerous.
Everything is dangerous, my dear fellow. If it wasn't so, life wouldn't be worth living. Well, I'm bound to say that I think you should have told her years ago.
When? When we were engaged? Do you think she would have married me if she'd known that the origin of my fortune is such as it is, the basis of my career such as it is, and that I had done a thing that I suppose most men would call shameful and dishonourable?
Slowly.
Yes, most men would call it ugly names. There is no doubt of that.
Bitterly.
Men who every day do something of the same kind themselves. Men who, each one of them, have worse secrets in their own lives.
That is the reason they are so pleased to find out other people's secrets. It distracts public attention from their own.
And, after all, whom did I wrong by what I did? No one.
Looking at him steadily.
Except yourself, Robert.
After a pause.
Of course, I had private information about a certain transaction contemplated by the government of the day, and I acted on it. Private information is practically the source of every large modern fortune.
Tapping his boot with his cane.
And public scandal invariably the result.
Pacing up and down the room.
Arthur, do you think that what I did nearly 18 years ago should be brought up against me now? Do you think it fair that a man's whole career should be ruined for a fault done in one's boyhood almost? I was 22 at the time, and I had the double misfortune of being well born and poor, two unforgivable things nowadays. Is it fair that the folly, the sin of one's youth, if men choose to call it a sin, should wreck a life like mine, should place me in the pillory, should shatter all that I have worked for, all that I have built up? Is it fair, Arthur?
Life is never fair, Robert, and perhaps it is a good thing for most of us that it is not.
Every man of ambition has to fight his century with its own weapons. What this century worships is wealth. The god of this century is wealth. To succeed, one must have wealth. At all costs, one must have wealth.
You underrate yourself, Robert. Believe me, without wealth you could have succeeded just as well.
When I was old, perhaps, when I had lost my passion for power, or could not use it, when I was tired, worn out, disappointed. I wanted my success when I was young. Youth is the time for success. I couldn't wait.
Well, you certainly have had your success while you are still young. No one in our day has had such a brilliant success. Under-Secretary for Foreign Affairs at the age of 40. That's good enough for anyone, I should think.
And if it is all taken away from me now? If I lose everything over a horrible scandal? If I am hounded from public life?
Robert, how could you have sold yourself for money?
Excitedly.
I did not sell myself for money. I bought success at a great price. That is all.
Gravely.
Yes, you certainly paid a great price for it. But what first made you think of doing such a thing?
Baron Arnheim.
Damned scoundrel.
No, he was a man of a most subtle and refined intellect, a man of culture, charm, and distinction, one of the most intellectual men I ever met.
Ah, I prefer a gentlemanly fool any day. There is more to be said for stupidity than people imagine. Personally, I have a great admiration for stupidity. It is a sort of fellow feeling, I suppose. But how did he do it? Tell me the whole thing.
Throws himself into an armchair by the writing-table.
One night, after dinner, at Lord Radley's, the Baron began talking about success in modern life, as something that one could reduce to an absolutely definite science. With that wonderfully fascinating quiet voice of his, he expounded to us the most terrible of all philosophies, the philosophy of power, preached to us the most marvellous of all gospels, the gospel of gold. I think he saw the effect he had produced on me, for some days afterwards he wrote and asked me to come and see him. He was living then in Park Lane, in the house Lord Woolcombe has now. I remember so well now. With a strange smile on his pale, curved lips, he led me through his wonderful picture gallery, showed me his tapestries, his enamels, his jewels, his carved ivories, made me wonder at the strange loveliness of the luxury in which he lived, and then told me that luxury was nothing but a background, a painted scene in a play, and that power over other men, power over the world, was the one thing worth having, the one supreme pleasure worth knowing, the one joy one never tired of, and that in our century only the rich possessed it.
With great deliberation.
A thoroughly shallow creed.
Rising.
I didn't think so then. I don't think so now. Wealth has given me enormous power. It gave me at the very outset of my life freedom, and freedom is everything. You have never been poor, and never known what ambition is. You cannot understand what a wonderful chance the Baron gave me, such a chance as few men get.
Fortunately for them, if one is to judge by results. But tell me, definitely, How did the Baron finally persuade you to, well, to do what you did?
When I was going away, he said to me that if I ever could give him any private information of real value, he would make me a very rich man. I was dazed at the prospect he held out to me, and my ambition and my desire for power were at that time boundless. 6 weeks later, certain private documents passed through my hands.
Keeping his eyes steadily fixed on the carpet.
State documents?
Yes.
Lord Goring sighs, then passing his hand across his forehead, looks up.
I had no idea that you, of all men in the world, could have been so weak, Robert, as to yield to such a temptation as Baron Arnheim held out to you.
Weak? Oh, I am sick of hearing that phrase, sick of using it about others. Weak? Do you really think, Arthur, that it is weakness that yields to temptation? I tell you that there are terrible temptations that it requires strength and courage to yield to. To stake all one's life on a single moment, to risk everything on one throw, whether the stake be power or pleasure, I care not. There is no weakness in that. There is a horrible, a terrible courage. I had that courage. I sat down the same afternoon and wrote Baron Arnheim the letter this woman now holds. He made £750,000 over the transaction.
And you?
I received from the Baron £110,000.
You were worth more, Robert.
No, that money gave me exactly what I wanted, power over others. I went into the house immediately. The Baron advised me in finance from time to time. Before 5 years I had almost trebled my fortune. Since then, everything that I have touched has turned out a success. In all things connected with money, I have had a luck so extraordinary that sometimes it has made me almost afraid. I remember having read somewhere, in some strange book, that when the gods wish to punish us, they answer our prayers.
But tell me, Robert, did you never suffer any regret for what you had done?
No. I felt that I had fought the century with its own weapons, and won.
Sadly.
You thought you had won?
I thought so.
After a long pause.
Arthur, do you despise me for what I have told you?
With deep feeling in his voice.
I am very sorry for you, Robert. Very sorry indeed.
I don't say that I suffered any remorse. I didn't. Not remorse in the ordinary, rather silly sense of the word, but I have paid conscience money many times. I had a wild hope that I might disarm destiny. The sum Baron Arnheim gave me I have distributed twice over in public charities since then.
Looking up.
In public charities? Dear me, what a lot of harm you must have done, Robert.
Oh, don't say that, Arthur. Don't talk like that.
Never mind what I say, Robert. I am always saying what I shouldn't say. In fact, I usually say what I really think. A great mistake nowadays. It makes one so liable to be misunderstood. As regards to this dreadful business, I will help you in whatever way I can. Of course, you know that.
Thank you, Arthur, thank you. But what is to be done? What can be done?
Leaning back with his hands in his pockets.
Well, the English can't stand a man who is always saying he is in the right, but they are very fond of a man who admits that he has been in the wrong. It is one of the best things in them. However, in your case, Robert, a confession would not do. The money, if you will allow me to say so, is awkward. Besides, if you did make a clean breast of the whole affair, you would never be able to talk morality again. And in England, a man who can't talk morality twice a week to a large, popular, immoral audience is quite over as a serious politician. There would be nothing left for him as a profession except botany or the church. A confession would be of no use. It would ruin you.
It would ruin me. Arthur, the only thing for me to do now is to fight the thing out.
Rising from his chair.
I was waiting for you to say that. It is the only thing to do now, and you must begin by telling your wife the whole story.
That I will not do.
Robert, believe me, you are wrong.
I couldn't do it. It would kill her love for me. And now about this woman, Mrs. Cheveley. How can I defend myself against her? You knew her before, Arthur, apparently.
Yes.
Did you know her well?
Arranging his necktie.
So little that I got engaged to be married to her once, when I was staying at the Tenbys. The affair lasted for 3 days, nearly.
Why was it broken off?
Airily.
Oh, I forget. At least it makes no matter. By the way, have you tried her with money? She used to be confoundedly fond of money.
I offered her any sum she wanted. She refused.
Then the marvellous gospel of gold breaks down sometimes. The rich can't do everything, after all.
Not everything. I suppose you are right. Arthur, I feel that public disgrace is in store for me. I feel certain of it. I never knew what terror was before. I know it now. It is as if a hand of ice were laid upon one's heart. It is as if one's heart were beating itself to death in some empty hollow.
Striking the table.
Robert, you must fight her. You must fight her.
But how?
I can't tell you how at present. I've not the smallest idea. But every one has some weak point. There is some flaw in each one of us.
Strolls to the fireplace and looks at himself in the glass.
My father tells me that even I have faults. Perhaps I have. I don't know.
In defending myself against Mrs. Cheveley, I have a right to use any weapon I can find, have I not?
Still looking in the glass.
In your place, I don't think I should have the smallest scruple in doing so. She is thoroughly well able to take care of herself.
Sits down at the table and takes a pen in his hand.
Well, I shall send a cipher telegram to the embassy at Vienna to inquire if there is anything known against her. There may be some secret scandal she might be afraid of.
Settling his buttonhole.
Oh, I should fancy Mrs. Cheveley is one of those very modern women of our time who find a new scandal as becoming as a new bonnet, and air them both in the park every afternoon at 5:30. I am sure she adores scandals, and that the sorrow of her life at present is that she can't manage to have enough of them.
Writing.
Why do you say that?
Turning round.
Well, she wore far too much rouge last night, and not quite enough clothes. That is always a sign of despair in a woman.
Striking a bell.
But it is worth while my writing to Vienna, is it not?
It is always worth while asking a question, though it is not always worth while answering one.
Enter Mason.
Is Mr. Trafford in his room?
Yes, Sir Robert.
Puts what he has written into an envelope, which he then carefully closes.
Tell him to have this sent off in cipher at once. There must not be a moment's delay.
Yes, Sir Robert.
Oh, just give that back to me again.
Writes something on the envelope. Mason then goes out with the letter.
She must have had some curious hold over Baron Arnheim. I wonder what it was.
Smiling.
I wonder.
I will fight her to the death as long as my wife knows nothing.
Strongly.
Oh, fight in any case. In any case.
With a gesture of despair.
If my wife found out, there would be little left to fight for. Well, as soon as I hear from Vienna, I shall let you know the result. It is a chance, just a chance, but I believe in it. And as I fought the age with its own weapons, I shall fight her with her weapons. It is only fair, And she looks like a woman with a past, doesn't she?
Most pretty women do. But there is a fashion in pasts, just as there is a fashion in frocks. Perhaps Mrs. Cheveley's past is merely a slightly décolleté one, and they are excessively popular nowadays. Besides, my dear Robert, I should not build too high hopes on frightening Miss Cheveley. I should not fancy Miss Cheveley is a woman who would be easily frightened. She has survived all her creditors, and she shows a wonderful presence of mind.
Oh, I live on hopes now. I clutch at every chance. I feel like a man on a ship that is sinking. The water is round my feet, and the very air is bitter with storm. Hush, I hear my wife's voice.
Enter Lady Chiltern in walking dress.
Good afternoon, Lord Goring.
Good afternoon, Lady Chiltern. Have you been in the park?
No, I have just come from the Women's Liberal Association, where, by the way, Robert, your name was received with loud applause. And now I have come in to have my tea.
To Lord Goring.
You will wait and have some tea, won't you?
I'll wait for a short time, thanks.
I will be back in a moment. I am only going to take my hat off.
In his most earnest manner.
Oh, please don't. It is so pretty. One of the prettiest hats I ever saw. I hope the Women's Liberal Association received it with loud applause.
With a smile.
We have much more important work to do than look at each other's bonnets, Lord Goring.
Really? What sort of work?
Oh, dull, useful, delightful things. Factory Acts, female inspectors, the 8 Hours Bill, the parliamentary franchise, everything, in fact, that you would find thoroughly uninteresting.
And never bonnets?
With mock indignation.
Never bonnets. Never.
Lady Chiltern goes out through the door leading to her boudoir. Takes Lord Goring's hand.
You have been a good friend to me, Arthur, a thoroughly good friend.
I don't know that I have been able to do much for you, Robert, as yet. In fact, I have not been able to do anything for you, as far as I can see. I am thoroughly disappointed with myself.
You have enabled me to tell the truth. That is something. The truth has always stifled me.
Huh. The truth is a thing I get rid of as soon as possible. Bad habit, by the way. Makes one very unpopular at the club, with the older members. They call it being conceited. Perhaps it is.
I would to God that I'd been able to tell the truth, to live the truth. Ah, that is the greatest thing in life, to live the truth.
Sighs and goes towards the door.
I'll see you soon again, Arthur, shan't I?
Certainly, whenever you like. I'm going to look in at the bachelor's ball tonight, unless I find something better to do, but I'll come round tomorrow morning. If you should want me tonight by any chance, send round a note to Curzon Street.
Thank you.
As he reaches the door, Lady Chiltern enters from her boudoir.
You are not going, Robert?
I have some letters to write, dear.
Going to him.
You work too hard, Robert. You seem never to think of yourself, and you are looking so tired.
It is nothing, dear, nothing.
He kisses her and goes out. To Lord Goring.
Do sit down. I am so glad you have called. I wanted to talk to you about... well, not about bonnets or the Women's Liberal Association. You take far too much interest in the first subject and not nearly enough in the second.
You want to talk to me about Mrs. Cheveley?
Yes, you have guessed it. After you left last night, I found out that what she had said was really true. Of course, I made Robert write her a letter at once withdrawing his promise.
So he gave me to understand.
To have kept it would have been the first stain on a career that has been stainless always. Robert must be above reproach. He is not like other men. He cannot afford to do what other men do.
She looks at Lord Goring, who remains silent.
Don't you agree with me? You are Robert's greatest friend. You are our greatest friend, Lord Goring. No one except myself knows Robert better than you do. He has no secrets from me, and I don't think he has any from you.
He certainly has no secrets from me. At least I don't think so.
Then am I not right in my estimate of him? I know I am right, but speak to me frankly.
Looking straight at her.
Quite frankly.
Surely you have nothing to conceal, have you?
Nothing. But, my dear Lady Chiltern, I think, if you will allow me to say so, that in practical life...
Smiling.
Of which you know so little, Lord Goring.
Of which I know nothing by experience, though I know something by observation. I think that in practical life there is something about success, actual success, that is a little unscrupulous. Something about ambition that is unscrupulous always. Once a man has set his heart and soul on getting to a certain point, if he has to climb the crag, he climbs the crag. If he has to walk in the mire...
Well?
He walks in the mire. Of course, I'm only talking generally about life.
Gravely.
I hope so. Why do you look at me so strangely, Lord Goring?
Lady Chiltern, I have sometimes thought that perhaps you are a little hard in some of your views on life. I think that often you don't make sufficient allowances. In every nature there are elements of weakness, or worse than weakness. Supposing, for instance, that any public man, my father, or Lord Merton, or Robert, say, had years ago written some foolish letter to someone.
What do you mean by a foolish letter?
A letter gravely compromising one's position. I am only putting an imaginary case.
Robert is as incapable of doing a foolish thing as he is of doing a wrong thing.
After a long pause.
Nobody is incapable of doing a foolish thing. Nobody is incapable of doing a wrong thing.
Are you a pessimist? What will the other dandies say? They will all have to go into mourning.
Rising.
No, Lady Chiltern, I am not a pessimist. Indeed, I am not sure that I quite know what pessimism really means. All I do know is that life cannot be understood without much charity, cannot be lived without much charity. It is love, and not German philosophy, that is the true explanation of this world, whatever may be the explanation of the next. And if you are ever in trouble, Lady Chiltern, trust me absolutely, and I will help you in every way I can. If you ever want me, come to me for my assistance, and you shall have it. Come at once to me.
Looking at him in surprise.
Lord Goring, you are talking quite seriously. I don't think I ever heard you talk seriously before.
Laughing.
You must excuse me, Lady Chiltern. It won't occur again, if I can help it.
But I like you to be serious.
Enter Mabel Chiltern in the most ravishing frock.
Dear Gertrude, don't say such a dreadful thing to Lord Goring. Seriousness would be very unbecoming to him. Good afternoon, Lord Goring. Pray be as trivial as you can.
I should like you to, Miss Mabel, but I am afraid I am a little out of practice this morning. Besides, I have to be going now.
Just when I have come in. What dreadful manners you have. I am sure you were very badly brought up.
I was.
I wish I had brought you up.
I am so sorry you didn't.
It is too late now, I suppose.
Smiling.
I'm not so sure.
Will you ride tomorrow morning?
Yes, at 10.
Don't forget.
Of course I shan't. By the way, Lady Chiltern, there is no list of your guests in the Morning Post of to-day. It has apparently been crowded out by the County Council, or the Lambeth Conference, or something equally boring. Could you let me have a list? I have a particular reason for asking you.
I am sure Mr. Trafford will be able to give you one.
Thanks so much.
Tommy is the most useful person in London.
Turning to her.
And who is the most ornamental?
Triumphantly.
I am.
How clever of you to guess it.
Takes up his hat and cane.
Goodbye, Lady Chiltern. You will remember what I said to you, won't you?
Yes, but I don't know why you said it to me.
I hardly know myself. Goodbye, Miss Mabel.
With a little moo of disappointment.
I wish you were not going. I have had 4 wonderful adventures this morning. 4.5, in fact. You might stop and listen to some of them.
How very selfish of you to have 4.5. There won't be any left for me.
I don't want you to have any. They would not be good for you.
That is the first unkind thing you have ever said to me. How charmingly you said it. 10 tomorrow.
Sharp.
Quite sharp. But don't bring Mr. Trafford.
With a little toss of the head.
Of course I shan't bring Tommy Trafford. Tommy Trafford is in great disgrace.
I am delighted to hear it.
Bows and goes out.
Gertrude, I wish you would speak to Tommy Trafford.
What has poor Mr. Trafford done this time? Robert says he is the best secretary he has ever had.
Well, Tommy has proposed to me again. Tommy really does nothing but propose to me. He proposed to me last night in the music room when I was quite unprotected, as there was an elaborate trio going on. I didn't dare to make the smallest repartee, I need hardly tell you. If I had, it would have stopped the music at once. Musical people are so absurdly unreasonable. They always want one to be perfectly dumb at the very moment when one is longing to be absolutely deaf. Then he proposed to me in broad daylight this morning, in front of that dreadful statue of Achilles. Really, the things that go on in front of that work of art are quite appalling. The police should interfere. At luncheon I saw by the glare in his eye that he was going to propose again, and I just managed to check him in time by assuring him that I was a bimetallist. Fortunately, I don't know what bimetallism means, and I don't believe anybody else does either, but the observation crushed Tommy for 10 minutes. He looked quite shocked. And then Tommy is so annoying in the way he proposes. If he proposed at the top of his voice, I should not mind it so much. That might produce some effect on the public. But he does it in a horrid confidential way. When Tommy wants to be romantic, he talks to one just like a doctor. I'm very fond of Tommy, but his methods of proposing are quite out of date. I wish, Gertrude, you would speak to him, and tell him that once a week is quite often enough to propose to anyone, and that it should always be done in a manner that attracts some attention.
Dear Mabel, don't talk like that. Besides, Robert thinks very highly of Mr. Trafford. He believes he has a brilliant future before him.
Oh, I wouldn't marry a man with a future before him for anything under the sun.
Mabel!
I know, dear. You married a man with a future, didn't you? But Robert was a genius, and you have a noble, self-sacrificing character. You can stand geniuses. I have no character at all, and Robert is the only genius I could ever bear. As a rule, I think they are quite impossible. Geniuses talk so much, don't they? Such a bad habit. And they are always thinking about themselves, when I want them to be thinking about me. I must go round now and rehearse at Lady Basildon's. You remember we are having tableaux, don't you? The triumph of something, I don't know what. I hope it will be a triumph of me. Only triumph I am really interested in at present.
Kisses Lady Chiltern and goes out, then comes running back.
Oh, Gertrude, do you know who is coming to see you? That dreadful Mrs. Cheveley in a most lovely gown. Did you ask her?
Rising.
Mrs. Cheveley? Coming to see me? Impossible.
I assure you she is coming upstairs, as large as life and not nearly so natural.
You need not wait, Mabel. Remember, Lady Basildon is expecting you.
Oh, I must shake hands with Lady Markby. She is delightful. I love being scolded by her.
Enter Mason.
Lady Markby, Mrs. Cheveley.
Enter Lady Markby and Mrs. Cheveley, advancing to meet them.
Dear Lady Markby, how nice of you to come and see me.
Shakes hands with her and bows somewhat distantly to Mrs. Cheveley.
Won't you sit down, Mrs. Cheveley?
Thanks. Isn't that Miss Chiltern? I should like so much to know her.
Mabel, Mrs. Cheveley wishes to know you.
Mabel Chiltern gives a little nod. Sitting down.
I thought your frock so charming last night, Miss Chiltern. So simple and suitable.
Really? I must tell my dressmaker. It will be such a surprise to her. Goodbye, Lady Markby.
Going already?
I am so sorry, but I am obliged to. I am just off to rehearsal. I have got to stand on my head in some tableau.
On your head, child? Oh, I hope not. I believe it is most unhealthy.
Takes a seat on the sofa next to Lady Chiltern.
But it is for an excellent charity, in aid of the undeserving, the only people I am really interested in. I am the secretary, and Tommy Trafford is treasurer.
And what is Lord Goring?
Oh, Lord Goring is president.
The post should suit him admirably, unless he has deteriorated since I knew him first.
Reflecting.
You are remarkably modern, Mabel. A little too modern, perhaps. Nothing is so dangerous as being too modern. One is apt to grow old-fashioned quite suddenly. I have known many instances of it.
What a dreadful prospect!
Ah, my dear, you need not be nervous. You will always be as pretty as possible. That is the best fashion there is, and the only fashion that England succeeds in setting.
With a curtsy.
Thank you so much, Lady Markby, for England and myself.
Goes out. Turning to Lady Chiltern.
Dear Gertrude, we just called to know if Mrs. Cheveley's diamond brooch has been found.
Here?
Yes, I missed it when I got back to Claridge's, and I thought I might possibly have dropped it here.
I have heard nothing about it, but I will send for the butler and ask.
Touches the bell.
Oh, pray don't trouble, Lady Chiltern. I dare say I lost it at the opera before we came on here.
Ah, yes, I suppose it must have been at the opera. The fact is, we all scramble and jostle so much nowadays that I wonder we have anything at all left on us at the end of an evening. I know myself that, when I am coming back from the drawing-room, I always feel as if I hadn't a shred on me, except a small shred of decent reputation, just enough to prevent the lower classes making painful observations through the windows of the carriage. The fact is that our society is terribly overpopulated. Really, someone should arrange a proper scheme of assisted emigration. It would do a great deal of good.
I quite agree with you, Lady Markby. It is nearly 6 years since I have been in London for the season, and I must say society has become dreadfully mixed. One sees the oddest people everywhere.
That is quite true, dear, but one needn't know them. I'm sure I don't know half the people who come to my house. Indeed, from all I hear, I shouldn't like to.
Enter Mason.
What sort of a brooch was it that you lost, Mrs. Cheveley?
A diamond snake brooch with a ruby. A rather large ruby.
I thought you said there was a sapphire on the head, dear?
Smiling.
No, Lady Markby, a ruby.
Nodding her head.
And very becoming, I am quite sure.
Has a ruby and diamond brooch been found in any of the rooms this morning, Mason?
No, my lady.
It really is of no consequence, Lady Chiltern. I am so sorry to have put you to any inconvenience.
Coldly.
Oh, it has been no inconvenience. That will do, Mason. You can bring tea.
Exit Mason.
Well, I must say it is most annoying to lose anything. I remember once at Bath, years ago, losing in the pump-room an exceedingly handsome cameo bracelets that Sir John had given me. I don't think he has ever given me anything since, I am sorry to say. He is sadly degenerated. Really, this horrid House of Commons quite ruins our husbands for us. I think the Lower House by far the greatest blow to a happy married life that there has been since that terrible thing called the higher education of women was invented.
Ah, it is heresy to say that in this house, Lady Markby. Robert is a great champion of the higher education of women, and so, I am afraid, am I.
The higher education of men is what I should like to see. Men need it so sadly.
They do, dear, but I am afraid such a scheme would be quite unpracticable. I don't think man has much capacity for development. He's got as far as he can, and that is not far, is it? With regard to women, well, dear Gertrude, you belong to the younger generation, and I am quite sure it is all right if you approve of it. In my time, of course, we were taught not to understand anything. That was the old system, and wonderfully interesting it was. I assure you that the amount of things I and my poor dear sister were taught not to understand was quite extraordinary. But modern women understand everything, I am told.
Except their husbands. That is the one thing the modern woman never understands.
And a very good thing too, dear, I dare say. It might break up many a happy home if they did. Not yours, I need hardly say, Gertrude. You have married a pattern husband. I wish I could say as much for myself, but since Sir John has taken to attending the debates regularly, which he never used to in the good old days, his language has become quite impossible. He always seems to think he is addressing the House, and consequently, whenever he discusses the state of the agricultural labourer, or the Welsh Church, or something quite improper of that kind, I am obliged to send all the servants out of the room. Is it not unpleasant to see one's own butler, who has been with one for 23 years, actually blushing at the sideboard, and the footmen making contortions in corners like persons in circuses? I assure you, my life will be quite ruined unless they send Sir John at once to the Upper House. He won't take any interest in politics then, will he? The House of Lords is so sensible, an assembly of gentlemen. But in his present state Sir John is really a great trial. Why, this morning, before breakfast was half over, he stood up on the hearth-rug, put his hands in his pockets, and appealed to the country at the top of his voice. I left the table as soon as I had my second cup of tea, I need hardly say. But his violent language could be heard all over the house. I trust, Gertrude, that Sir Robert is not like that.
But I am very much interested in politics, Lady Markby. I love to hear Robert talk about them.
Well, I hope he is not as devoted to blue books as Sir John is. I don't think they can be quite improving reading for one.
Languidly.
I have never read a blue book. I prefer books in yellow covers.
Genially unconscious.
Yellow is a gayer colour, is it not? I used to wear yellow a good deal in my early days, and would do so now if Sir John was not so painfully personal in his observations, and a man on the question of dress is always ridiculous, is he not?
Oh, no. I think men are the only authorities on dress.
Really? One wouldn't say so from the sort of hats they wear, would one?
The butler enters, followed by the footman. Tea is set on a small table close to Lady Chiltern.
May I give you some tea, Mrs. Cheveley?
Thanks.
The butler hands Mrs. Cheveley a cup of tea on a salver.
Some tea, Lady Markby?
No thanks, dear.
The servants go out.
The fact is, I have promised to go round for 10 minutes to see poor Lady Brancaster, who is in very great trouble. Her daughter, quite a well-brought-up girl, too, has actually become engaged to be married to a curate in Shropshire. It is very sad indeed. I can't understand this modern mania for curates. In my time we girls saw them, of course, running around the place like rabbits. But we never took any notice of them, I need hardly say. But I am told that nowadays country society is quite honeycombed with them. I think it most irreligious. And then the eldest son has quarrelled with his father, and it is said that when they meet at the club, Lord Brancaster always hides himself behind the money article in the Times. However, I believe it is quite a common occurrence nowadays, and that they have to take in extra copies of the Times at all the clubs in St. James's Street. There are so many sons who won't have anything to do with their fathers, and so many fathers who won't speak to their sons. I think myself it is very much to be regretted.
So do I. Fathers have so much to learn from their sons nowadays.
Really, dear, what?
The art of living. The only fine art we have produced in modern times.
Shaking her head.
Ah, I am afraid Lord Brancaster knew a good deal about that, more than his poor wife ever did.
Turning to Lady Chiltern.
You know Lady Brancaster, don't you, dear?
Just slightly. She was staying at Langton last autumn when we were there.
Well, like all stout women, she looks the very picture of happiness, as no doubt you noticed. But there are many tragedies in her family besides this affair of the curate. Her own sister, Mrs. Jekyll, had a most unhappy life, through no fault of her own, I'm sorry to say. She ultimately was so broken-hearted that she went into a convent, or on to the operatic stage, I forget which. No, I think it was decorative art needlework she took up. I know she had lost all sense of pleasure in life.
Rising.
And now, Gertrude, if you will allow me, I shall leave Mrs. Cheveley in your charge and call back for her in a quarter of an hour. Or perhaps, dear Mrs. Cheveley, you wouldn't mind waiting in the carriage while I am with Lady Brancaster? As I intend it to be a visit of condolence, I shan't stay long.
Rising.
I don't mind waiting in the carriage at all, provided there is somebody to look at one.
Well, I hear the curate is always prowling about the house.
I am afraid I am not fond of girl-friends.
Rising.
Oh, I hope Mrs. Cheveley will stay here a little. I should like to have a few minutes' conversation with her.
How very kind of you, Lady Chiltern. Believe me, nothing would give me greater pleasure.
Ah, no doubt you both have many pleasant reminiscences of your schooldays to talk over together. Good-bye, dear Gertrude. Shall I see you at Lady Bonar's tonight? She discovered a wonderful new genius. He does nothing at all, I believe. That is a great comfort, is it not?
Robert and I are dining at home by ourselves tonight, and I don't think I shall go anywhere afterwards. Robert, of course, will have to be in the house, but there is nothing interesting on.
Dining at home by yourselves? Is that quite prudent? Ah, I forget. Your husband is an exception. Mine is the general rule, and nothing ages a woman so rapidly as having married the general rule.
Exit Lady Markby.
Wonderful woman, Lady Markby, isn't she? Talks more and says less than anybody I ever met. She is made to be a public speaker, much more so than her husband, though he is a typical Englishman, always dull and usually violent.
Makes no answer, but remains standing. There is a pause. Then the eyes of the two women meet. Lady Chiltern looks stern and pale. Mrs. Cheveley seems rather amused.
Mrs. Cheveley, I think it is right to tell you quite frankly that had I known who you really were, I should not have invited you to my house last night.
With an impertinent smile.
Really?
I could not have done so.
I see that after all these years you have not changed a bit, Gertrude.
I never change.
Elevating her eyebrows.
Then life has taught you nothing?
It has taught me that a person who has once been guilty of a dishonest and dishonourable action may be guilty of it a second time, and should be shunned.
Would you apply that rule to everyone?
Yes, to everyone without exception.
Then I am sorry for you, Gertrude, very sorry for you.
You see now, I was sure that for many reasons any further acquaintance between us during your stay in London is quite impossible.
Leaning back in her chair.
Do you know, Gertrude, I don't mind your talking morality a bit. Morality is simply the attitude we adopt towards people whom we personally dislike. You dislike me. I am quite aware of that, and I have always detested you. And yet I have come here to do you a service.
Contemptuously.
Like the service you wished to render my husband last night, I suppose. Thank heaven I saved him from that.
Starting to her feet.
It was you who made him write that insolent letter to me? It was you who made him break his promise?
Yes.
Then you must make him keep it. I give you till tomorrow morning, no more. If by that time your husband does not solemnly bind himself to help me in this great scheme in which I am interested—
This fraudulent speculation.
Call it what you choose. I hold your husband in the hollow of my hand, and if you are wise you will make him do what I tell him.
Rising and going towards her.
You are impertinent. What has my husband to do with you, with a woman like you?
With a bitter laugh.
In this world like meets with like. It is because your husband is himself fraudulent and dishonest that we pair so well together, Between you and him there are chasms. He and I are closer than friends. We are enemies linked together. The same sin binds us.
How dare you class my husband with yourself? How dare you threaten him or me? Leave my house. You are unfit to enter it.
Sir Robert Chiltern enters from behind. He hears his wife's last words and sees to whom they are addressed. He grows deadly pale.
Your house, a house bought with the price of dishonour, a house everything in which he has paid for by fraud.
Turns around and sees Sir Robert Chiltern.
Ask him what the origin of his fortune is. Get him to tell you how he sold to a stockbroker a cabinet secret. Learn from him to what you owe your position.
It is not true. Robert, it is not true.
Pointing at him with outstretched finger.
Look at him. Can he deny it? Does he dare to?
Go at once. You have done your worst now.
My worst? I have not yet finished with you, with either of you. I give you both till tomorrow at noon. If by then you don't do what I bid you to do, the whole world shall know the origin of Robert Chiltern.
Sir Robert Chiltern strikes the bell. Enter Mason.
Show Mrs. Cheveley out.
Mrs. Cheveley starts, then bows with somewhat exaggerated politeness to Lady Chiltern, who makes no sign of response. As she passes by Sir Robert Chiltern, who is standing close to the door, she pauses for a moment and looks him straight in the face. She then goes out, followed by the servant, who closes the door after him. The husband and wife are left alone. Lady Chiltern stands like someone in a dreadful dream. When she turns round and looks at her husband, she looks at him with strange eyes, as though she were seeing him for the first time.
You sold a cabinet secret for money? You began your life with fraud? You built up your career on dishonour? Oh, tell me it's not true. Lie to me, tell me it's not true.
What this woman said is quite true. But Gertrude, listen to me. You don't realize how I was tempted. Let me tell you the whole thing.
Goes towards her.
Don't come near me, don't touch me. I feel as if you had soiled me forever. Oh, what a mask you have been wearing all these years. A horrible painted mask. You sold yourself for money. Oh, a common thief were better. You put yourself up to sale to the highest bidder. You were bought in the market. You lied to the whole world. And yet you will not lie to me.
Rushing towards her.
Gertrude! Gertrude!
Thrusting him back with outstretched hands.
No, don't speak. Say nothing. Your voice wakes terrible memories. Memories of things that made me love you. Memories of words that made me love you. Memories that now are horrible to me. And how I worshipped you! You were to me something apart from common life, a thing pure, noble, honest, without stain. The world seemed to me finer because you were in it, and goodness more real because you lived. And now, oh, when I think that I made of a man like you my ideal, the ideal of my life.
There was your mistake. There was your error. The error all women commit. Why can't you women love us, faults and all? Why do you place us on monstrous pedestals? We have all feet of clay, women as well as men. But when we men love women, we love them knowing their weaknesses, their follies, their imperfections, love them all the more, it may be, for that reason. It is not the perfect, but the imperfect who have need of love. It is when we are wounded by our own hands, or by the hands of others, that love should come to cure us. Else what use is love at all? All sins, except a sin against itself, love should forgive. All lives, save loveless lives, true love should pardon. A man's love is like that. It is wider, larger, more human than a woman's. Women think that they are making ideals of men. What they are making of us are false idols merely. You made your false idol of me, and I had not the courage to come down, show you my wounds, tell you my weaknesses. I was afraid that I might lose your love, as I have lost it now. And so, Last night you ruined my life for me. Yes, ruined it. What this woman asked of me was nothing compared to what she offered to me. She offered security, peace, stability. The sin of my youth, that I had thought was buried, rose up in front of me, hideous, horrible, with its hands at my throat. I could have killed it forever, sent it back into its tomb, destroyed its record, burned the one witness against me. You prevented me. No one but you know it. And now what is there before me but public disgrace, ruin, terrible shame, the mockery of the world, a lonely, dishonoured life, a lonely, dishonoured death it may be some day. Let women make no more ideals of men. Let them not put them on altars and bow before them, or they may ruin other lives as completely as you whom I have so wildly loved, have ruined mine.
He passes from the room. Lady Chiltern rushes towards him, but the door is closed when she reaches it. Pale with anguish, bewildered, helpless, she sways like a plant in the water. Her hands, outstretched, stem to tremble in the air like blossoms in the mind. Then she flings herself down beside a sofa and buries her face. Her sobs are like the sobs of a child. End of Act 2.